Um, and you feel free to tell me if this is kind of off limits, if I need to cut it. Where on the political spectrum do you kind of see yourself falling?
Libertarian is where I would fall. I'm a pretty solid libertarian. The mayor's race in Fort Smith is nonpartisan, so we don't run in any kind of party. But I lean very strongly libertarian, and I'm not hiding that. I'm not trying to pretend to be a social conservative, because I'm not. I'm not trying to pretend to be, economic liberal. I'm not. I'm a libertarian, and if you don't know what that is, you probably are one. That's the best thing I can tell you.
Right.
If you don't know what a libertarian is, you probably are one, but you got convinced you were a Republican or a Democrat at some point in your life, but you're probably actually libertarian.
Yeah, well, I ran the gambit, so I grew up in kind of a classical liberal household, and everybody was Democrat up until Obama, and then they kind of parted ways with the Democrat Party just because Obama to them was an unknown, and it kind of especially there were some things I think that scared my family about him. So, but they kind of just drifted around, and that's where I was. Of course, I was registered Republican, but I don't know. I don't really know how I ended up registered Republican. And, oddly enough, I voted for Donald Trump because of things I'd heard Democrats say my whole life. I'd always heard that a businessman needed to run America. And so I was like, hey, businessman. And then I became so disillusioned with everything after 2016. I registered as independent, and then I went green, and then I ended up in the American Solidarity Party. So how did earlier when we spoke on the phone, you said that you suspected that you and I would disagree on a lot, and I really don't think that we would. What kind of things do you think we would disagree on, Shayne? This isn't really relevant to your run. I was
No,
curious.
I want you to ask me any question. I want transparency, and curiosity is good. If we don't have the ability to disagree, it doesn't mean, like, when disagreement happens in a conversation between people, both sides are getting represented, both sides are learning. So, and sometimes we learn that there isn't a disagreement at all. So tell me, from your perspective, what your party represents.
Well, first and foremost, everything starts with dignity in life, and that's for the entire life, from conception to natural death. Does that make us a pro-life party? It does. Does that make us a little bit more on the extreme side? That's for people to decide. We have seen scientific evidence. We have religious morals, teachings that some of our party platform has been written in, just like some of the overall beliefs of the American governance has been written, that lead us to believe that life starts at conception, and we want to see everybody live that life in the best way possible all the way. So how does that differ from the Republicans? Well, recently the Republicans have kind of abandoned the pro-life mission. Some say that it's just they have loosened their restraints. They've kind of become a little bit more progressive in that area. I think it's pandering to voters. I don't think that's standing on their morals at all. We differ from the Republicans because we don't want to just say, have the kids and that's good enough. We want to put social, I guess you could call it safety nets, programs. I hesitate to use that term because it's kind of become associated negatively with socialism for some odd reason. But we want social programs in place that will support people so that they can have these families. We do support traditional families, but we also recognize that we are not in a climate where you can have that. And we want to make sure that people have access to that.
Okay, so let me disagree with you on a couple of things, just so we can have some disagreement here. One, I'm a libertarian, meaning I believe in individual freedoms.
Right.
I believe you have the freedom to have your moral ideals and live your life in the most moral way possible. And your tax dollars shouldn't be used for something that you don't morally support. So like abortion,
Right.
there should be no taxpayer funding for that. You should be able to decide your tax dollars just don't go to that purpose. If you are forced to pay taxes, you should at least be able to not allow your tax dollars to go for something that you have a moral problem with, because I do believe in freedom, absolute freedom. But I also believe in freedom. So if somebody wants to terminate their life early with a doctor, they're doing no harm to no one. So that is not a crime. That is not something that anyone else should be able to dictate. And we should respect their freedom to be able to choose to do that. Do I support and want people to do that? No. But I respect the fact that there is no harm being done to anyone. That means there's no crime. That means there's nothing that needs to be infringed upon. And we should have respect for that as a society. So that would be a differing opinion for you there.
Sure.
It's not a lack of respect for your moral reasoning or from your Christian heritage and values, but a government should not dictate its values to the individuals and not allow those individuals to choose to live in a different way just because you have a moral problem with that.
Well, let me push back on that. So we actually just did an episode with a friend of ours from Canada on the MAID program up there. When I even before this is long before I came into the American Solidarity Party, I looked at abortion with a secular worldview and decided that I was against it, mainly because the Democratic Party had just run amok with it. It was just Wild West. It wasn't classical liberal, safe, legal, and rare. It had become almost like, I don't know, like a trend amongst them. And I said, this is a bridge too far. With something like the MAID program, like you're saying, somebody ending their life. I grew up with my father being terminally ill. I have cousins that were terminally ill, and very, very, very painful conditions. So I understand why something like the MAID program could seem to be humane and merciful. But what really concerns me about it is the way, seeing Canada, the way they've talked about it, is they don't talk about it so much as it being merciful for people, as the savings it gives them for their universal health care. And it's being pushed. Our friend told us about, he was a news anchor in Canada. He had a condition where his jaw vibrated, a muscular condition, and they offered him MAID for that. And that's what scares me is my skepticism of capitalism is how far do we push that if it's something that we can commoditize and make money off of it. And so ultimately now I do appeal to the Christian moral. I don't want somebody to end their life. There's always going to be value to a person, even if it's just to their immediate family. And so that's what concerns me is at what point does this become business more than people?
Well, every society has to figure out how things are rationed because there isn't an unlimited supply, period. Healthcare, when you have a universal healthcare system, has to be rationed some way, and it's not rationed based on who can afford. It must be rationed in some way. So I could see where that would implement into rationing of that. And I'm not familiar with this subject in Canada specifically to be able to give you any counterpoints toward that. I will say this, though. My Great Dane was dear to me and needed to be mercifully put down. That was an act of mercy. I've seen many animals put down in acts of mercy. There are situations where sometimes it makes complete and total sense. And I would want that done for me. If you are looking at a year of suffering and definitely not being able to produce anything of value, or being put down so you're no longer a burden on your family and you don't suffer, I can't see a moral reason why, because I'm not creating a crime. A crime is when you do something against someone's consent, when you infringe upon their rights. And a merciful death is not doing any harm to anyone. So unless you can show me where it's causing harm to another person, it is not a crime. And that's an idealistic libertarian idea.
Right.
But you have to be able to show me that there is a victim for there to be a crime that exists.
It might be my new age past that I've had, but it's just a ripple effect to me. So for an example, there was one case that we talked about. It was a young man. He was blind, had diabetes, and he made use of the MAID program. It was actually rejected, and his mother was very happy because she, wanted him to seek out some different treatments and have hope for him. He ended up getting approved without her knowing, and he died, and she was not there. And so to me, that did inflict pain on the family. And at what point we're seeing this not so much in Canada, but this is more of a European thing where younger people are making use of it and they're doing it for mental health reasons. And I know that there's supposed to be roadblocks in place to stop this from people. You're supposedly you have to have all your mental faculties to make that decision. But somebody who's suffering from a severe bout of depression, and I speak from experience in this, they're not rational, and I think that's a very dangerous thing to offer that kind of person, especially a young person, because I know there was, when you're 16, 15, 16, you get broken up with, and it's like, it's time to end it all. I hate to laugh at it, but
that goes back to parental consent for any procedures to someone under 18, which I think is a totally respectable part of our law already.
here in America, yes, so I do agree. I would say that right now America does have the best safeguards on it, but we won't harp on this too much. We could make a whole episode of this. Is there anything else that you had that glaringly obviously you disagreed with?
Yes, very much so. We could agree or disagree on several other things of this. So your social safety net for the children. Describe, if you could paint the perfect social safety net for the kids. What does that look like?
It's difficult to say.
You get to
But
design it 100% with no. You can perfectly craft the law in exactly the way that it needs to be, so that it can be. You have no compromise necessary. You can write a law that will take care of these children. What does that law look like?
Okay, well, thank you for giving me such a free range there. Even then, having free range would be difficult to say because there's so many aspects of taking care of somebody. One thing that we've had issues with just locally is school lunches. They have started to turn parents over to collections for not paying for school lunch. If you're going to send your kid to school, if you're going to be required more or less to send your kid to school, they should provide lunch. There's a myriad of ways that you could remedy this. I mean, for starters, federal money. Where are we going to get more federal money? Well, let's cut out a few of the bombs that we're producing. You could start in the school itself. There could be a few programs that are cut back on. I don't particularly know what football spending is, but I would think that's a pretty good chunk of the budget. You don't have to cut the sports programs out completely. So, for example, there you go. Get kids fed. Orphanages, a little bit more better funding for that as an obvious one. Again, federal money that we could reallocate. The biggest thing that I would like to see is education for mothers so that they know how to come into motherhood, what their bills are going to be like, what they can expect, what the hospital, blanking out, the pediatric care is going to cost, what they're going to have to prepare for in that regard. And then you just have to provide support for them. And we can do this through offering child care, and we can ramp child care back up. So where I'm from, the church that I used to attend, we were converting our former daycare into just basically classrooms. And I said, we don't have really a daycare in this area. So why are we getting rid of the daycare? And they said, well, we can't afford to do it. And you'll appreciate this, Shay, the red tape is too much for us to have the daycare. We can't afford the daycare. So we need to get that red tape out of the way, get these daycares back up and functioning. Little things like that, Shayne.
So the I guess the counterpoint to this would be, you talked about using federal dollars. You talked about not dropping some bombs on somebody else, and let's use that money to do some of these things. I'm all for that. I could very much agree with you on that part of things. But Federal money represents money that has been taken by someone from force. That's what taxation is. It's somebody comes and takes money from Shayne via force. If I don't pay it, I will be taken to jail, and if I refuse to go to jail, they will unalive me in order to take my money. So you are using force against a person in order to take that money and then create a program to give it to someone. Now, you say this is a more moral use than some other moral use, such as a bomb, so that makes it feel okay. But ultimately, it is still using force to take money from somebody to allocate to something. And when I started this with you a little bit ago, I said, I don't think your money should go to fund abortions because you should be able to allocate where your money goes. In the same way, if you're taking money from me, I should be able to decide where it goes. That is, and this is a pipe dream libertarian ideology, but this is no limits. I would believe that my money could be earmarked towards the programs that I want it to go towards. And my programs would not be bombs on other nations. My programs I'd much rather feed children that need to be fed. I would much rather help to educate. I would much rather do those things. And I think you would find that regardless of Christian or not, I think you would find an incredible amount of support for feeding and taking care of children over and above dropping bombs on people that have a slightly different skin tone. I think the madness becomes when you create a huge ball of money that someone feels just exists with no moral thought to the fact that this is taken by somebody via force. That's when the morality of what would this person want me to do with this money goes away. So I think connecting the person back to their tax dollar is how you accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. I don't think you even have to re-educate Christian morals. I think human nature itself will help to take care of that.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't have to be necessarily from a Christian perspective. In fact, honestly, this is kind of a way to keep the church from rising to more power than it is. If, for instance, if tax dollars were to go away, the church, and this is kind of how the idea of orphanages and hospitals and charity started, was with the early church. And if you did not have any kind of tax structure, and I get what you're saying, trust me, I have plenty of libertarian friends. I've heard taxation is theft, and until I can't stand it any
I did
longer.
not say that.
I know you did not, and I very much appreciated it, and I was hesitant to even bring it up, but that is kind of a general libertarian idea. So just
Do you disagree?
it's not. I don't see it as theft so much as.
So stop paying it and see what happens.
Well, yes, I agree. It's taken by force, but it kind of reminds me of back in very early times, like when the Dutch started to come, and there was like a community coffer that they would fill, for these things. Now, obviously, the force factor wasn't there per se.
Exactly. That makes it
Well, hold on now. I would say that it kind of just changed forms. Like now it's at the force of, the IRS agent and a gun. Back then it was social, shunning. You would be kind of shunned by your community if you weren't paying into this. You didn't want to be ostracized.
How does your church function with voluntary gifts?
Like tithes?
Or whatever voluntary gifts your church gets, right?
Then nothing's really said about it.
Well, I'm just saying that it doesn't even have to be said about it, but your church can still function and do its things, that its goals, and can move forward with things. That's all voluntary.
But
there are many, many great organizations in this nation that aren't religious that have voluntary donations that people are making.
But there's so much waste in doing that because of all the administrative fees. I mean, that's what scares me. I've actually quit.
There's no administrative fees or waste in government, so that makes it okay.
I
mean, literally, you're taking from something that's way more efficient than government. Like if we can create voluntary taxation, this is again libertarian pipe dream. I don't believe this is something I can bring to fruition. But we're just talking about disagreements here. If I can voluntarily give my money and allocate where it goes, I'm all for that. And I would absolutely give to my government for the things like roads and stuff that I think that money should be earmarked towards. I am totally for that. And I think most Americans would be happy with that ability to do so. And you'd say, well, we wouldn't have enough funding for maybe defense. And that should tell you something. Maybe we have been overdoing aspects of our budget for a while.
For sure.
And if there's not enough people willing to put their money into bombs that kill other people in other parts of the world, maybe we need to reallocate and rethink what we're doing here. Maybe we've gone down a road that we didn't need to go down for a while. And once your dollars have to be earmarked towards it, I think it would shift. Now, some people would definitely give towards defense, and I do think we need to have some defense. I'm not crazy. I know that we have to be able to defend ourselves as a nation, but I also know that defense as our nation is also very strangely similar to colonialism in many ways.
Oh yeah, for certain. Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, how would you, like you're saying with the earmarking, how would you do that? Would it just be still would be tax, I suppose, but it would be a tax sheet at the end of the year that you get, and you just mark down in each box what percentage you want to give?
Well, it would be voluntary, so there wouldn't necessarily be a tax sheet needed, but you could voluntarily give to the National Defense Fund. You could voluntarily give to the social welfare. I mean, that would be the types of things that you could very easily do. I would voluntarily give to infrastructure and roads. I would voluntarily give to administrative funds to be able to run administrative functions. That would be a voluntary tax structure. I'm totally okay with that. I think that's good.
What happens when Elon Musk donates $200 billion to infrastructure and the Musk data center pops up?
That would be a natural thing that would happen. Like what happens when Elon Musk gives $200 billion to congressmen, and then the Elon Musk data center pops up. There's no change. There's no difference, except those congressmen will use that money to buy yachts first, and it won't actually all go towards that. And then they'll take money from me to build the data center. So you just take out the middlemen this way. Like you're not going to stop bad things from happening. If somebody decides they're going to do something, that's not going to happen. But you can choose to make it voluntary for people to choose whether they're contributing to the bad thing happening or not.
Ah, it's a myth, isn't it? We have a heck of a government, don't we, Shayne?
Have I made you think a little?
No, I mean, well, yes. I mean, I'm definitely absorbing and thinking about what you're saying, and I agree to an extent. But like I said, I've known a lot of libertarians, so these are not necessarily new arguments to me. I just err more on the side of we have to have some kind of structure. And obviously it's not working out as it is, but I'm just.
If you can design a structure where you don't create a victim, I'm all for you to design that structure. Make it voluntary, make it so that nobody is forced, and I support you 100%. I'm all for communism. If you can create a commune lifestyle and make it work, go for it. I've actually supported some communes that I've seen before. Jesus People USA back in the day, I went to a big music festival. They used to have Japusa. That was a commune. So I'm all for voluntary expressions of those things. I'm not okay with force, which is when it becomes a part of government. That's where we start to have a problem. I don't want you to be forced to do things that you don't want. I don't want your church to be forced to do things it doesn't want. I don't want individuals to be forced to do things unless it's involved with them infringing upon the rights of somebody else. So if I'm, committing a crime, stealing from somebody, something like that, force can be used to stop that from happening, to take a reaction to that, imprisonment, loss of rights related to having, all of that is justice.
But would it not be a crime in your eyes for somebody, again, I don't want to beat up on Musk too badly, but if Musk said, you know what, I don't have to pay anything, so I'm not going to pay anything. And what if all the billionaires in America just decided we don't want to pay anything in?
Okay, and they decide that. Then what harm have they done you? How did they turn you into a victim? Tell me how
if we are funding things, if we are depending on their money to fund things like.
Wait. You just made how are you a victim?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we are depending on that money for cancer research, if we're depending on that
No, no, no,
money
no,
for
no, 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 no. Now you're depending on theft. So you are victimizing them to take care of something that you're dependent upon. So no, you can't use the theft premise in order, like, how are you a victim of them choosing to do something with or without their money? You aren't
but
a victim. You feel a loss of something that you want to spend their money on that you think would be better than what they're spending it on.
but
But
is it not like a form of paying rent to live in a civil society, a flourishing society like the United States?
it's
How
more
would it,
your social contract style of thinking. So yes, a lot of people would argue that that is the case, and there would be an expectation of these people paying. But I'm just saying that we can't start from the fundamental. They must give because they have. And if they have, they must be giving us something that we want. They don't get without giving us something they want. That's how capitalism works. So they're providing us. TikTok makes billions because that people like me produce content that you want to watch on it. So you watch it and make ads and all these things happen. So TikTok is giving you a thing that you want and it's making you money. It doesn't owe you anything else. It provided you a service that you chose to spend your money in. If TikTok isn't contributing to our society, isn't wanting to help us with roads or infrastructure or other things, we could all quit supporting TikTok and support something else instead that does help us. It creates responsibility within ourselves to actually choose the companies and the things that we're supporting, rather than having the government decide who we're going to support and who we're not, which worked great when, Tom Cotton decided he's going to make TikTok illegal because, China, and China sounds scary. And it cost me thousands and thousands of dollars, and it cost many creators across Arkansas and across the United States a lot more than that. And over what? Over the fact that China is scary. That's all. And that was an overreaction of government force against a multi-billion-dollar company. And it turned out there wasn't really any spying or anything else, and there's no real premise or anything around that. In fact, TikTok had safer data centers than most of your Facebook and everything else.
interesting?
Ultimately, it came about to Facebook is a very large political donor to the Tom Cotton political campaign, and they were tired of losing the competitiveness against TikTok. So why don't we just make it illegal? That is how people use government force to their benefit. That is how the structure of taxation and all of these things is currently used to create victims. And do I think TikTok is harmless or no? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that is an example of a company weaponizing our system in order to make a victim of another company, and that happens all the time. You could do countless examples. Whether it be hemp rope, we don't want to have to compete against hemp rope, so we're going to make nylon rope, and now we're going to make hemp illegal, so you can't have hemp rope anymore in the United States. Literally make your competition illegal.
Right.
This has gone back a long, long time since we had governments with forces that could implement things. So you can see examples of this in ancient Egypt, I'm sure, if we were to study. Bottom line is, though, we have all just accepted force as a part of our life, and if it's coming from the government, it's fine. And that is a premise I refuse to accept. I see force against others as a crime, and it should be kept to the smallest amount possible to secure the freedoms of others as much as possible. And the closer we can get to limiting that, the less power the government would have to do that.
So you're not saying no force, just limited force.
Limited force, yes. Force necessary to protect the rights and the freedoms of those individuals and give everything as voluntarily as possible. That's my ideologue, like perfect world.
Yeah, but
I know that's unrelated to this mayor thing. I know that's unrelated to the reality of our situation, and I'm willing to compromise on those values, but that's like ultimately the ideological value that I would have.
But who's to say what level of force is adequate?
The force necessary to stop somebody from infringing upon the rights of someone else is adequate. So if you can't stop somebody with mild force, so let's just use a heinous crime. Somebody is being raped. You see her being raped. Do you intercede?
Well, yeah.
So you try to stop it. Hey, stop that. Maybe your first attempt. Leave her alone. Then you escalate if necessary till you get to the appropriate amount of force to stop this crime from occurring. And that's the logical way it goes. So the amount of force necessary is what's necessary in order to protect the freedom that is being infringed. And she is a victim. Her rights are being infringed. Her consent is being violated, just like a person who is being taxed in order to give money to a competitor of Facebook or whatever. That's the same type of crime. I mean, it's a different type of crime, but it's the same idea. The consent is being violated.
Mm. Well, what if the force is what is it, a $5 trillion military budget? What if that's required
In
to
order to
protect?
secure freedoms, yes. Well, and if you can make the case that that is what is necessary, then that would be one thing. But the
I most
overwhelming
certainly cannot make that case.
cannot make that case either. And I don't think that there's anybody that thinks that that case could be made. Not honestly.
Oh, there's many people who would like for it to be the reality.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, I am absolutely not anti-military. I have friends that are dear friends of mine that are absolute military, Purple Heart, real heroes that have gone through and done battles. And I would have this conversation in front of them still because I am transparent. I believe that a lot of the battles and things that they have gone through were probably things that we could have avoided. So,
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
and I don't think very many good things came about from a lot of those over the last, quite a long time in American history.
Yeah, I think me and you probably see really eye to eye on that. So